Hello everyone, this is Frog's COTE Analysis Room. Here, we analyze and explain Classroom of the Elite. Alright, today's video is an analysis of the new faction that finally started making moves in Year 3, Volume 2. In the story of COTE, there are several educational institutions such as the WR, an educational facility created by Ayano Koji's father, Ayano Koji Atsuomi, and ANHSI, which is the setting for this story. And now the existence of what could be called a third educational institution, provisionally named the Shirogane facility, has been hinted at. In this video, I'm going to speculate on what position this facility holds, its educational policies, its role in the story, and which students might belong to it. First, before we talk about Year 3, Volume 2, I want to discuss a certain facility that was foreshadowed in Volume 0. The Blu-ray extras for Season 2 of the COTE anime included episodes depicting Atsuwami's political power struggle and Kiyotaka's time in the WR. At this time, Atsuwami was in conflict with the Kijima faction led by the current Prime Minister. It was revealed that the Kijima faction, in addition to ANHSI, which was the centerpiece of their policy, was also operating a facility with a purpose similar to the WR. Let me quote this scene where this was revealed. "The existence of the White Room you were involved with is not something Kijima-sensei welcomes. What are you saying? He already has ANHSI. He could even put the White Room forward as his second flagship facility." Granted, ANHSI is one of his main operations, but at the same time, he was quietly advancing a new similar facility behind the scenes. In other words, that second facility was already in motion. Which is to say, it wouldn't be desirable for the WR to surface first. So, the reason the WR was forced to cease operations was that if it entered the public stage before the Kijima faction's second facility, it would put the Kijima faction at a disadvantage. In other words, the WR facility run by Atsuwami and Kijima's second facility share the same objective. From this, it has long been thought that the Kijima faction also has children, like WR students, who have undergone elite education. With that in mind, since Volume 0, there has been much speculation about whether graduates of this facility are at ANHSI, and in Year 3, Volume 2, people who seem to hold such positions finally appeared. This relates to the connection with Shirogane sensei, who was mentioned in Nanase's monologue, the conversation between Shiraishi and Nanase, and Shiraishi's side story. Nanase Tsubasa and Matsuo Eiichiro were cared for by Shirogane sensei since childhood, and the fact that Tsukishiro also has a connection with Shirogane sensei makes it clear that they are an important figure. Furthermore, during Shiraishi's and Nanase's secret meeting, it was revealed that both of them have a connection to Shirogane sensei. In fact, Shiraishi's side story confirmed that she received a mission from Shirogane sensei to observe Ayano Koji. In that SS, it's mentioned that Shiraishi was given her assignment in a room she was called to just before graduation. This tells us that the environment Shiraishi was in had a concept of graduation, leading to the prediction that she was in a special facility disguised as a middle school or a cram school. Based on all this, I've come to believe that the so-called Shirogane facility might be Kijima's second facility. It certainly feels natural to view the facility as belonging to the Kijima faction, since Shiraishi's assignment was to monitor Ayano Koji. From here on, I'll proceed under the assumption that the facility Kijima was operating behind the scenes is this Shirogane facility, and I'll consider its purpose and what kind of education it provides. First, let's focus on the point that this facility shares the same objective as the WR. In short, to create talented individuals for the future of Japan. As an approach to achieve this, the WR took the method of turning ordinary people into geniuses. However, I believe the Shirogane facility may have taken the opposite approach of turning talented people into geniuses. Why do I think this?
In Volume 0, where the WR and Kijima's second facility were introduced, there was a deliberate comparison between geniuses and ordinary people, and words like talent and gifted were used. The WR was a facility established with the goal of producing geniuses even from ordinary people, overriding their genetics. This involves some meta-analysis, but Kijima's facility should logically operate differently from the WR. So, when I considered how they could differentiate themselves while sharing the same ultimate goal, I thought they might have adopted the method of providing elite education to children who already possess talent. In other words, the complete opposite approach to the WR. In the latest volume, Year 3, Volume 2, through Nanase's monologue and conversations with Horikita, Nanase was described as mediocre and not as someone among the talented. Given the high probability that Nanase was at the Shirogane facility and her statement that she was half-baked there, it's plausible that the Shirogane facility is a place that gathers children with talent for elite education. Nanase, being mediocre among them, might have been described as half-baked for that reason. In fact, Shiraishi, who is definitively from the Shirogane facility, possesses a unique trait, the ability to read emotions from voices. This can definitely be called a gift, a sign of a person with talent. Could this facility be a place that provides elite education tailored to the individual talents that each person possesses? This means Shiraishi might have further enhanced her special ears at this facility. It seems reasonable to think that Shiraishi developed her talent at the Shirogane facility. In the world, there are many people who possess talent, but it never blossoms, or they fail to develop or utilize it properly, and it remains dormant. I theorize that the Kijima faction has focused on this, running a two-pronged strategy of ANHSI as a place to discover talent, and the Shirogane facility to provide elite education to those who already possess talent. In the future, students from the Shirogane facility might stand in the way of Atsuomi's faction and Kiyotaka.
Now, in a conversation between Shiraishi and Nanase, who are graduates of this facility, the following was also discussed. Are your fellow students, Shiraishi-senpai, given a similar role? That is, the role of an observer? Who knows? The possibility that they have been given the same role as me is not zero, but I can't say for sure. What we were assigned was simply to spend 3 years as normal students. That's all. From this, we learned that Shiraishi's fellow students, in other words, other students from the Shirogane facility, still exist at the school. It seems that these students and Shiraishi share a common order, to spend 3 years as a normal student. This means there's a possibility that among the students who haven't stood out so far, there are graduates of the Shirogane facility. This is starting to feel like the search for the WR student in the early Year 2 arc. It's unclear whether there's a single one of these fellow students or multiple, but considering that both the Shirogane facility and ANHS are run under Kijima's policies, it wouldn't be surprising if several of them were sent here. It's possible that their curriculum involves being educated at the Shirogane facility until middle school, then experiencing life as a normal student at the Advanced Nurturing High School, and after graduation, returning to Shirogane Sensei and the Kijima faction. So, considering the possibility that there are multiple fellow students, I'll list a few potential candidates from the current third-year students. First, the criteria for identifying these fellow students are possessing some kind of talent, having a reason they must stay at the school for 3 years, and based on the conversation between Shiraishi and Nanase, there's a high probability that they're students who have little contact with each other. Using these as my hypothetical criteria, I'll analyze the students who seem to fit. First up is the most likely candidate for a fellow student, Koenji Orokusuke. Koenji is undeniably a bundle of talent, and based on his potential and actual abilities shown so far, the possibility that he has received some form of elite education has been raised before. In an episode about his middle school days, it was mentioned that Koenji received authentic elite education in various parts of the world. Koenji asked was mentioned in the preview for Season 2, Episode 8 of the anime. This part about receiving elite education could very well be part of the Shirogane facility's curriculum. Furthermore, in Year 2, Volume 11, Koenji made a statement like this. As for me, I think it would be more meaningful to revisit China and devote myself to training rather than staying at this school. But circumstances on my end prevent me from doing so. As you can see, Koenji has a reason why he must be at the school. Also, the fact that he skillfully but surely avoids his own expulsion implies that Koenji has a reason to stay at the school for 3 years. This closely resembles the characteristic of the fellow students I mentioned earlier, to spend 3 years as a normal student. Therefore, he can be predicted to be the student closest to being a fellow student at the moment. The idea of the heir to the Koenji family, a major supporter of the Kijima faction, entering a facility run by Kijima is very plausible. It also serves as a justification for Koenji's high level of ability. So I'm going to predict that he is also a student from the Shirogane facility. A confrontation between Ayano Koji and Koenji could be framed as a battle between the masterpieces of the facilities they were trained in. Now, if there are other fellow students besides Koenji, let's talk about who might fit the bill. However, at present, there are no other students with as much supporting evidence as Koenji, so please take this as just for reference. The second candidate for a fellow student is Amikura Mako from Ichinose's class. So far, we haven't seen any special talents or exceptional qualities in Amikura. But if you unravel the series of events in Year 3, Volume 2, a potential connection between Amikura and Shiraishi emerges. The scene in question is the conversation right after Shiraishi and Nanase made contact. At this time, Shiraishi had grasped Ayano Koji's movements and set up the secret meeting with Nanase so they wouldn't be noticed. Her statement at that time was as follows. I have eliminated the risks you are concerned about, Nanase-san. Ayano Koji-kun entered the gym with Ichinose-san a little while ago. I estimate he won't be coming out for at least an hour.
As you can see, Shiraishi knew that Ayano Koji had entered the gym with Ichinose. But if you compare this with the actual timeline, there's a discrepancy. On this day, before entering the gym, Ayano Koji first spoke briefly with Watanabe from Ichinose's class, and then he completed the entry process and entered the gym before Ichinose arrived. In other words, at that point, he had not entered the gym with Ichinose. Indeed, at that moment, he even said to himself, there's still a little while until Ichinose arrives, but I guess I'll get changed and start training. He actually met up with Ichinose a bit later. The timeline is that after this, he talked with Utsutomiya, who seemed to be there to check on the new first years, then spoke with the staff member Akiyama-san, and only after that did he meet up with Ichinose and Amikura. Also, the gym at this time was empty, with Koenji in the new first years not present, so it's unlikely there were other students. This means the only people who could report that he entered the gym with Ichinose would be the staff member Akiyama-san or Amikura, who arrived with Ichinose as the person who passed the information. But the report given earlier was entered the gym with Ichinose. If Akiyama-san had made the call, she should have conveyed that Ayano Koji entered before Ichinose arrived. In other words, Akiyama-san's report would more naturally be Ayano Koji-kun has entered the gym. Given the situation, a quicker report would have been better. So, by process of elimination, Amikura, who met up with Ayano Koji alongside Ichinose, is the one who passed the information to Shiraishi. If the report came from Amikura's perspective, it's not at all strange for her to report that Ayano Koji and Ichinose entered the gym, omitting herself. Thus, if Shiraishi and Amikura, who have had no prior connection, are communicating behind the scenes, the possibility that the fellow student is Amikura Mako naturally arises. Amikura's lack of notable achievements so far would also make sense if she was just trying to live as a normal student. If Amikura's hidden talents, activities, or a meaningful past come to light in the uninhabited island exam in the next volume or later, she would become very suspicious. I want to pay close attention to Amikura's actions from volume 3 onwards.
Next, the third candidate is the heroine of Ryuen's class who played a major role this time, Shina Hiyori. Regarding Hiyori, even looking back at previous volumes, there were no descriptions that made her seem like a fellow student. However, in this volume, there was one particular phrase Shiraishi used that caught my attention. It was Shiraishi's parting words after introducing herself to Ayano Koji. Well then, I'll be going. Please give my regards to Shina-san. As you can see, Shiraishi said to Ayano Koji, please give my regards to Shina-san. This phrase is a roundabout way of asking the person you're speaking with to convey a message to a third party, but Shiraishi and Hiyori have had absolutely no prior relationship, which makes this statement itself strange. It makes you wonder, what regards are you asking him to give? This one point is the sole reason Hiyori is suspected of being one of Shiraishi's fellow students. Hiyori herself has high observational skills and is arguably a talented student. Also, by frequently visiting the library, belonging to the tea ceremony club, and cooperating in class battles, she could be said to be living as a normal student in a sense. While the possibility is low for now, I want to keep the theory of Hiyori being a fellow student in the back of my mind, especially considering Shiraishi's statement. The final candidate I raised today is Mori Nene from Horikita's class. Mori Nene is a female student who is on good terms with Karizawa, giving the impression of very typical classmate. However, this same Mori Nene is a student who in year 2, volume 9, sent Karizawa a photo of Ayano Koji and Ichinose coming out of the gym. The day this photo was taken was 2 days before a special academic exam, a time when basically all students are focusing on their studies for the final push. At such a time, Mori, who is not a top-ranking student, just happened to capture this scene. Moreover, both this time and the time Mori took the picture shares a commonality of the gym entrance and exit. It's these subtle odd details that have put Morinene's name on the list of fellow student candidates. Incidentally, Mori sent this photo to Karizawa 2 days after it was taken, meaning for some reason there was a 2-day time lag. Yeah, I don't know if there's a reason, but normally you think she would send it on the day she took it. At the later discussion about Ayano Kojiri, hosted by Maezono, there's no description of her saying a single word, so she's a student in a nebulous position of being possibly suspicious. I want to keep her on the list of candidates and pay attention to her future actions. So, it seems like there are a good number of potential candidates for these fellow students. It's possible that these students will receive a mission from Shirogane sensei in the future and come into contact with Ayano Koji or the WR. Depending on their numbers and orders, it's not out of the question that many students could target Ayano Koji. In addition to this, Utsunomiya, the new first year, and Atsuomi's faction member Ishigami are likely to get involved, so I'm getting excited about future developments. And with that, this has been an analysis of the new faction hinted at in the latest volume, the Shirogane facility. This is a faction that will definitely be a major part of future developments, so I want to continue my analysis while paying close attention to the small odd details about various characters. I plan to do a detailed analysis of Utsunomiya and the new first years in a separate video. This channel will continue to post videos focusing on COTE analysis and breakdowns. Due to my personal schedule, updates will be very irregular. But if you found this helpful or interesting, please consider subscribing to the channel. I also post COTE analysis on my X account regularly, so I'd appreciate it if you followed me from the link in the description. Well then, I'll see you in the next video.